Welcome to Belgrade and welcome to Serbia. It is both an honor and a privilege to attend your lecture in person. But today, I feel, together with many people in this room, pride that you chose to visit our beautiful city. We do hope you will enjoy Belgrade, and I would like to say a bit more about the great teacher who chose to share his wisdom with us. It is not easy to introduce Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche, but I will do my best here. In the early 1980s, he made his first trip abroad to teach in Australia, and to all intents and purposes, he has not stopped traveling since. He founded several international organizations along the way to support and broaden the scope of his activities. He is the head of the Dzongsar Monastery and Dzongsar College, and is currently responsible for the care and education of approximately 1,600 monks in 6 monasteries and institutes in Asia. I would like to mention Siddhartha's Intent and Khyentse Foundation, who provide necessary support. 84,000 oversees the translation of the word of the Buddha into modern languages. I would also like to mention Lotus Outreach and Lomon Society. Rinpoche is the author of several books about Buddhism that have been translated into many languages. For example, What Makes You Not a Buddhist? Not for Happiness, and also I should mention The Guru Drinks Bourbon. He is also well known outside the Buddhist world for the featured films he wrote and directed, such as The Cup, Travelers and Magicians, Vara, A Blessing, and Hema Hema. Buddha Dharma is currently being assimilated into a number of different cultures as the Buddha's teaching continues to spread throughout the world. But as Rinpoche is at pains to point out, while the cultural packaging that comes with Tibetan Buddhism is often optional, the Buddha Dharma itself needs no modernization. Shakyamuni was a Buddha, and therefore he was omnipotent. So every word he uttered, every tradition he instigated, every aspect of his legacy is as appropriate and necessary today as it was during his lifetime. This is the message Rinpoche emphasizes continually when he teaches, focusing primarily on the Buddhist view rather than the ethnic background that it is set against, never hesitating to draw attention to the flaws and corruptions that have crept into contemporary spiritual path and fearlessly laying bare the challenges faced by teachers and students of the Buddha Dharma in the 21st century. After all of this travel, we're very thankful that you have finally visited us here in Belgrade. I believe we live in a world where real values are rare or they're non-existent. We have either forgotten them or we have never bothered to recognize what those values are. We hope that we tonight are going to use our time with Rinpoche wisely and try to put some things in a perspective. And hopefully we will pause for a moment and wonder, what is important in life? And how is it possible to live the life in the present moment? Finally, and in order to help you feel more at home, I decided to bring 2 cards, a red one and a yellow one, in case someone misbehaves, as I thought that this was a very good idea you presented at your recent lecture in London. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, first I'd like to express my happiness and I don't know, speechless being here in a country that I have heard a lot, in the city that I have heard about, but never really actually imagined that I will one day go there. But somehow, here I am. And not only I'm here as a tourist, but actually managing to have a conversation with many of you here. I thank you for creating this opportunity. I'm sure there's so much things that I can learn from many of you. I was told that a lot of you may not have much information about something called Buddhism, which is a bit of a challenging for me because there will be a lot of assumption in my habitual pattern that the nuances that I use, the language that I use, I don't know, the words that I use, I will have a lot of assumption that you either understood that as how I understood, or you don't understand as how I don't understand. For instance, I was just in Jerusalem teaching Hebrew University, and there was a lot of questions about purpose of life. Like, what is the purpose of life in Buddhism? See, this always, throw me off balance a little bit, because the very question, what is the purpose of life? If I don't pay attention, I could really mislead people when attempting to explain the Buddhist philosophy. Because as I know more and more people from the West, I'm beginning to realize that such questions like purpose of life is very Abrahamic question. It's a question that's very based on like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Does Buddhism has a purpose of life? Now here we have to be really careful. I don't think Buddhists believe in a purpose of life that is designed by some almighty, creator or some supernatural force. Even the word Buddhism is very foreign to us. I'm sure a lot of you know, like Hinduism, the so-called Hinduism, is actually it's a term that's invented by Abrahamic people, like probably maybe the British may have used this. Like in entire my study of Eastern philosophy, especially when I study Buddhism, we have never encountered a word called Hinduism. So within this context, when people assume that Buddhism is a spiritual path, even that you have to be kind of careful. Many, in Buddhism, we don't really assert or there's no theory of spirit. When we talk about spiritual path, Is it a worldly path? Probably not. So in that sense, you can say it is a spiritual path. But spiritual path as it is known in the, like in the Jewish tradition, Christian tradition, or Islamic tradition, I cannot really say whether it's a spiritual path. As I say, does not really have a concept of spirit or a soul also. So there are a lot of scholars who say that Buddhism is not really a religion. Again, here we have to be careful because, as you can see, here I am sitting right in front of you and I'm wearing something like this. So you will immediately assume that he's a religious person because he's wearing kind of slightly different outfit. And then yes, Buddhists have this kind of seemingly religious outfit. Not only we have the seemingly religious outfit, we have religious icon like a statues. And if any of you have been to the East, like in Nepal or India, the Buddhists also have gestures such as this. And Buddhists have a practice called meditation where you sit straight and then also the practice of chanting mantras, chants, prayers. Buddhists have all of those. So there is that religious sort of aspect or a religious, phenomena. But at the same time, is it a religion? If the religion is defined as a path that believes in some sort of a mythical, almighty creator or God, then Buddhism does not have that kind of belief. There is also a question whether Buddhism is a philosophy or not. One of the most celebrated Buddhist commentator is called Nagarjuna. He was a great Buddhist commentator or a philosopher, if you call it a philosopher. His philosophy is praised very proudly as the philosophy of non-philosophy. So what I'm trying to say is, if you are new, if you haven't heard about Buddhism, I have to tell you that Buddhism is quite complicated. At the same time, it is very simple. We believe that Buddhism declined a lot in many different places, especially its own sort of home country, India. Big part, although the Buddhism declined a lot due to political reasons, forced conversion, like places like Afghanistan or Indonesia, Pakistan. These are once upon a time a thriving Buddhist country, but now is no more. But that is not really the challenge of Buddhism. The real challenge of Buddhism, I think, is in two folds. One is a really a vicious one, is the culture, the hosting culture. So when Buddhism traveled to different parts of the world, like China, Japan, Korea, and now also in the West, somehow we as a human being, without the culture, we don't know how to sort of even do anything. We are very proud of culture, and culture is very closely associated with the language. And language is very closely associated with how you think. So the culture, many times the culture, and there's a strong evidence that culture ends up always hijacking Buddhism. As Liana, was explaining. Culture is one of the sort of hindrance. At the same time, culture is also a vessel. Another factor of why Buddhism is not really, growing, popular, is it's kind of Buddhism from the worldly point of view and from the emotional point of view. Buddhism is kind of useless. I always make this joke about, in the entire Buddhist scriptures, there's not even like something useful like wedding ceremony. There is no such thing as a Buddhist wedding ceremony. And the reason is because Buddhism is supposedly all about truth. The so-called Buddhism, as we know now, actually came because there was Prince 2,500 years ago. There was a prince who, seeing old age, sickness, death, really, seeing the futility of so-called the worldly life, wanting to know higher truth. Is there something beyond this thing that we have? And the prince basically renounced his royal life and he went to the forest, and there he has understood the truth. And when we are talking about the truth, we are not talking about some sort of a mystical, mythical, religious truth. One of the most fundamental truths that Buddhists talk about is that everything that is made is, or compounded, are impermanent. So, how do we even have a Buddhist wedding? Let's say, couples meet and couples are now in front of you, and then the ceremony of wedding, and then at the end, if you really have to live true to Buddhist philosophy, you have to tell the couple, okay, you got married, but everything is impermanent, you might get divorced tonight. Nobody's going to like this. You have to always say, may you be together forever until the death takes you apart. But the Buddhists don't really sort of believe in these things. But having said this, I myself have married a lot of people. We do still throw flowers. You know what I mean? They're very complicated. It's like, it's very simple, but at the same time, it's very complicated, and it's vast, and I think to give you the picture of Buddhism, if you ask me, what is it that Buddhists can offer to me? I will say the Buddhism has probably the most experienced, most established ways to enjoy, live with the life of paradoxy. And this is probably the gift of Buddhism. So when I say this, it's actually, even though it sounds very complicated, it's not really complicated. Buddhists think that everything is paradoxical. Buddhists think that it's a bit like, you are looking at a beautiful rainbow. If you see a beautiful rainbow, it's there, but it's also not there. It's there, but it's, the color, the shape of the rainbow, It's there. You can take a photo, you can take a selfie, you can talk about it, you can enjoy. But you better not go too close, and you better not go definitely with a chainsaw and cut the rainbow, because there isn't such thing as a truly existing rainbow. This is how the Buddhists believe life is, our so-called life. There are a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of, hope and fear, a lot of judgment, a lot of, just details in our life. But no matter what kind of life we are leading, it's there, but at the same time, it's not really there. Now, if you can understand this, not just intellectually, but practically, then you are what we call awakened person. And the word awakened is it's a translation of the word Buddha, means awakened. Now you may think this is kind of very philosophical and it's very complicated. You may think that, but actually it is not. For instance, like this room, I don't see any of you walking around with a water gun. You call it, when you are a kid, you have a water gun or a Barbie doll. I don't see you walking around with a Barbie doll. But when you are 6 years old, when you are 7 years old, the Barbie doll is everything. The water gun was everything. Or when you are playing with your parents in the sand, beach, you build a castle, and then you put everything. If something goes wrong, you will cry, and so on and so forth. But now, you have understood that the Barbie doll is not really, how it appeared at that time. But you have now a new Barbie doll. You have house. You have, job. You have so-called relationship. It's just that the Barbie doll and the water gun has been replaced by something else. And right now you are playing with these toys. And you are so sucked into these toys. And if someone says, okay, when you are young and building the sand castle, by evening when your parents say, okay, time to go home, you feel very disappointed. So likewise, if somebody comes and say, your life, whatever you are fighting for, is there, but it's not there. Let's just, call it a day. It's difficult. It's difficult because we strongly believe in pursuit of happiness. We strongly believe in our definition of success. We are strongly afraid of definition of whatever we have defined, sort of failure, living, death, all of it. And this, what I'm saying is, in a way, you always do know something is meaningful and the meaningless at the same time. But the problem with us is we always replace with another toy, and then the newest toy, we get so obsessed with it and we think this is real. And this obsession makes you, this obsession, this engrossment, this state of mind makes you occupied. And this is called, in Buddhist term, we call it samsara. Samsara is a very important word in Buddhism. it has something to do, samsara means going round and round. So it's like if you have a cat and if you tie a small meat, the tail, you go round and round trying to catch this. And you are the one who is pulling and you are the one also going after. So samsara means going round and round. And then if you know this is just a game, this is just an illusion. But when I say the word, like again here, I have to be careful. When I use the word illusion, I'm not demeaning it, I'm not downplaying it. Illusions are very important and illusions are very powerful. Especially if you don't know that it is an illusion, you can get caught by this illusion. Another example that I can give you, which is a classic Buddhist example. Like let's say you are dreaming, and you are dreaming that you are falling from a cliff, from a big building. If you don't know that you are dreaming, what do? You panic. You will think that's it. I'm finished. I'm dead now. As soon as I fall on the ground, I'm finished. But what happens? Somewhere in the middle, if you know, no, this is just a dream, then actually you will play with this experience. Since this is just a dream, how about just let me move my hand and try to fly? Because I'm not going to die anyway, because this is just a dream. So this living, knowing, learning how to play with this world of paradoxy is so much to do with Buddhism. If I try to put it in a nutshell, especially for those who are new to this so-called Buddhism. Now, as I said, Buddhism traditionally, historically, Buddhism sort of originated in India. India, as you know, is like the mother of many so-called spiritual, again I'm using the word spiritual path. Prior to Buddhism, there was already a lot of spiritual. So I'm really reluctant to use the word spiritual, because prior to Buddhism, there was a lot of, it's a bit like this. For instance, nowadays, we have, ordinary people. Then we have also people who look inside and they want to know more about sun and moon. They want to know more about evolution of the earth. They want to know more about the cause of certain disease. They want to know more about, what will happen after 500 years or 50 years later. So you could say that what we call Indian religion, they were in India, they were just like that. They were like scientists. They were seeker of the truth. They want to know what is really there behind all this, perception. Then came, I would say, around 2,500 years ago, came two great revolutionaries. One was the Buddha, the other one is kind of his distant cousin, Mahavira. And these two people, I would say, they went philosophically, they kind of, they went ahead. They revolutionized many concept that existed prior to their, their realization. For instance, before the Mahavira and before the Buddha, there was a lot of, let's call them religion, Hindu religion that believed in creator God. But when Buddha came, he was one of those first person who said, no, there is no God. Before the knower of the God. The person who knows the God has to come simultaneously. It's a bit like, the subject and object. Like when I see the flower and the knower of the flower has to come together. So the Buddha rejected the idea that first the God came and then he created. Buddha, actually, more strictly speaking, the Buddha thought it was us, our mind, who created the God and then believed that he created us. So then he taught many, many different teachings, and many of these teachings were labeled as this school, that school. For instance, the school that I practice or I follow is what we call Madhyamika school, which basically you can say is the school who says nothing exists. It's kind of a, sometimes it's a little bit of a derogatory, nisabhava, they call it, which means nothingness there. And then there are other schools which also I practice and I follow, is mind-only school. That school of Buddhism believes only the mind, our mind. Our mind creates everything, and our mind is the king, the creator. The only thing that matters is our mind. So many teachings are taught. If you can tame your mind, if you can understand what is this mind, if you can, control your mind, everything is under control. Examples given such as, you cannot make the whole earth soft and, smooth. But if you wear shoes and then walk around, it's equal to making all earth soft and smooth. Just like that, you cannot invade and conquer your enemy. You cannot gain everything. You cannot, control all this, everything externally. But if you can control your mind, then you have control to everything. There are also schools, and these schools probably now, as I said, Buddhism declined a lot in many different parts of the world. These schools are probably no more exist there are studies, but the practitioners, those who strongly follow that path, probably do not exist anymore. But this school may be interesting for those who are kind of interested in Buddhist philosophy. We call them partless seer. And I believe that Einstein, the physicist, I think he was very impressed with this, because this school of Buddhism believed that everything is created by two things. One is your mind, the other is the smallest atom or whatever. Now, I don't know, maybe smaller than an atom. Very, very fine particle. Those are the only two that created the world. So very, 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 I think these days there's a lot of conversations, dialogues between so-called scientists and Buddhists. I think a lot of these dialogue are also based on philosophy found in the, this what we call Vabhayashika school of Buddhism, which is sort of the partless ser, very, very scientific. Anyway, these are just a glimpse of the Buddhist lineages or the school. Okay, so now so if I put in a nutshell the Buddhist view, when we talk about Buddhism, we are talking about a path, right? When we talk about a path, you have to always talk about the end of the path, because the path has to have an end, otherwise it's useless. The end of the path and sort of the ground, the view of the path. What is it that Buddhists believe in? What is it that Buddhists really believe in? So there are three or four things that Buddhists believe in. One, I have already told you, that all compounded things are impermanent. Nothing is permanent. That's one of the beliefs. And the second is all dualistic thoughts. Anything that comes out from dualistic mind. Dualistic means this is bad, this is good, this is tall, this is short, this is black, this is white. Basically dualistic distinctions. Any kind of a perceptions perceived by dualistic mind will always lead you to pain. Reference is a pain, basically. It's a little bit more difficult to understand, especially on the emotional level. Intellectually, maybe easier. And then the third is, this is a very important one in Buddhism, how it appears. How it appears is not how it is. Basically, there is nothing that truly exists outside. And this is probably one example that Buddhists always gave. For instance, I don't know, is there water? Yes. So for instance, like here, when this is in this container, it's a water. And it's a drinkable water. When this same thing inside is in the toilet, it's not really drinkable water. You understand? So there is already, because due to the circumstance and the situation, how we perceive water is also changed. And also for a scientist, really, really meticulous scientist, they not only see it as a water, but they see it as a H2O. But for the ordinary people, you can't go to a restaurant and ask, can I have a glass of H2O? They will have a little bit of, they will feel a little strange. Even more so, now, you and I see this as a water, but if there's a fish inside, we don't know what they see. What fish thinks? Maybe it's not a water. Definitely it can't be water because they are not human beings. Now, are we going to vote who is real, what we see and what they see? We are surely going to lose because there are more fish in the universe than we human beings. So, what we see is not truly existent there. And this happens, this is not like sort of a philosophical level. It's even in our day-to-day life. If we see a man and if we like him, we see him as a very good man, good-looking man. But the same man can be looked at by someone else who hates him. And he's like, every movement of him is like annoying, ugly, unpleasant. So, the phenomena basically truly do not exist. These three are the fundamental overall Buddhist view. So that's just, I want to, because it's, as I said, it's very complicated. I'll just sort of first lay out some of this, and then I will let you ask questions. Probably this is the best way so that we can have a conversation. So that's the Buddhist view. Now the Buddhist goal, remember, a path has to have a goal. What is the end result? What do you want? What is it that the Buddhists are getting? Now this is interesting. Actually, Buddhists don't practice Buddhism to get something. Buddhists practice Buddhism to remove things. Not to get something, but to remove. Because Buddhists believe that we, as you and I, we are perfect. There's nothing to get. In fact, the Buddhists always say, you and I are Buddha, especially Mahayana Buddhism. You and I are here, and we are all Buddha. That guy who came in India 2,500 years ago, he's actually a symbolic Buddha. In certain way, he's a less important. Because he's just a symbolic. The real Buddha is sitting here and here and there. This is the real Buddha, as it is, perfect. But then what's wrong? We are wrapped. We are cocooned by defilement, emotions such as anger, hope, fear, depression, self-loathing, thinking you are bad, thinking there's something lacking, lack of confidence, greed. These things have covered you. So all you need to do is remove this. The classic Buddhist example is the sky and the cloud. No matter how many clouds there is in the sky, the actual sky, space hasn't changed at all. It's perfect as it is. You just have to remove, if you want to see the clear blue sky, that cloud has to go. So that is the end result of Buddhism. If you want to know what is Buddhism, Buddhist end. Now, how do you get to there? What discipline I should have? What kind of discipline should I have? Now, the pillar of Buddhist discipline is awareness. Awareness. Now, the moment I mention the word awareness, immediately some of you may be thinking, oh, he's now talking about meditation. Not necessarily. Even the word meditation, as I said right in the beginning, there's a lot of, I think, misassumption, misinterpretation, because the moment the word meditation is mentioned, immediately people think in terms of sitting straight, breathing normally, like yoga, meditation, so on and so forth. Actually, to be really strict, I'm not even talking about that kind of a ritual. Those rituals helps, definitely. Chances of you being aware by sitting straight is higher than chances of you, lying on a hammock with a, what was it? Raki. Drinking raki and then a hammock. You have a higher chance sitting straight, maybe up in the mountain or looking at an ocean or in a living room, quiet, without music, without traffic noise. You have a higher chance. But it doesn't mean that that's the, if you sit straight perfectly, it doesn't make you become better Buddhist. That's not how we judge. You could be the best straight sitter, but you don't have the full awareness, then you don't have the path. So The Buddhist practice is so much to do with awareness. And awareness of what? What are we trying to be aware of? The truth that I was talking earlier. So let's visit the truth again. All compounded things are impermanent. Remember? So what are we supposed to be aware? Let's say I'm meeting this man from Australia, Zell, and then I should be thinking, okay, this may be my last time to see him. Because it's true. We never know. He may die, I might die. This may be it. So if I have that, now this is where people think the Buddhists are very gloomy, you understand? Always bad news. Why are they talking about death? But the Buddhists have a different attitude. Buddhists think if you have that, then you have a really caring and loving mind. Because how would you look at, like if you have a baby, and if your baby have some fatal disease, then the mother will look at this baby in a very different, because he or she is not going to last long. So there's much more appreciation. And not only our friend here, I could be drinking this water and see, this is it. This is my last water. And wow. Usually, how many times do we miss the taste of water, the texture? Just, it's so amazing. It is so beautiful and it's just so profound. The taste of the water, the weight of the water, the color of the water. But normally, we are not aware because we are always thinking about something else. Like I'm thinking about, day after tomorrow's flight that I have to go to, things like this. We are always occupied. So we are talking about a simple awareness, simply awareness. And if I go a little bit deeper, just in case you want to know. For instance, if you have anger, like if you are an angry person, and then usually what happens? An angry person, when he or she is angry, of course they throw their tantrum, they lose it. But then later they judge and they condemn, oh, how terrible. This is So then it does not really help. It ends up becoming more judgmental. But the judgmental makes it more complicated. But instead, the Buddhists say, when you have anger, not necessarily you have to sit straight, of course. It will look really strange if you are having a, heated argument with your partner and then suddenly you sit straight. It might make your partner even more angry. But just for a moment, if you are watching your anger, if you are just aware of this anger, and if you keep on doing it, slowly you will realize all the game that you play with the anger is just like the sand castle that you used to build. It's so kind of humorous, and it's like, why I was angry with this? Of course. So the Buddhist practice or the Buddhist discipline is all boiled down to something called awareness. Instead, actually, it's very, very related. The word Buddha, awakened one. Buddhist practice, awareness. And what are you aware of? The truth. And when we are talking about the truth, as I mentioned earlier, we are not talking about anything mystical or magical. Or well, maybe it is a magical, but definitely it's not a religious. All compounded things are impermanent. There's nothing religious about it. You understand? Now, the lastly, just Buddhist behavior. What should the Buddhist behavior be? Now, it will be interesting now this is another thing that I'm encountering as I talk with a lot of my Caucasian friends, those who are influenced by the, in the West. In Buddhism, morality and ethic is a secondary. Wisdom is the primary. Wisdom is the most important. Morality and the ethic, without the wisdom, Buddhists look very cautiously. Because morality and the ethic without the wisdom can make you very proud. And then righteous, self-righteous, judgmental, and then okay, this is the only way. You have to be, you can't drink, you can't eat, there's all that. And then, you look at someone who smoke or drink or whatever, then you look down. Now this, if you go to the East, in case some of you go to the East, like let's say Buddhist monastery, you can observe this quite clearly. You will encounter monks who have shaved their head, who are really, serene and austere, very simple life. If you go to Burma, Sri Lanka, they beg food. They only eat what they are given on that day, and they have no storage room, So tomorrow they again go back and go out and beg, and you will see that. But is that the Buddhist fundamental sort of ideal Buddhist behavior? No. You will see Buddhists who do business, Buddhist lawyers, totally accepted all of this. And not only that, in the monastic situation, like I myself I have several monasteries. Most of them are what we call bhikshu, meaning they are monks, like celibate and all that. But I have also several monasteries, especially in the East, Bhutan. They are all householders. So they have, their children, they keep hair, they don't shave hair, they wear earrings. So all of this is a little bit confusing, you understand? Sometimes it's kind of frustrating, sometimes one almost wants to make the Buddhism so simple, saying that, okay, as a Buddhist, you are not allowed to eat chicken. As a Buddhist, you must wear socks. As a Buddhist, you must do this and that. Something few, like 1 or 2 or 3. There will be lots and lots of Buddhists if we have something simple. Because it's very strange. Because as much as we human beings say that we want freedom, but we also like orders. Like this is the only way, and this is the best way, and you can't do anything else. We love those. And Buddhism, I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately, don't have that. So Buddhism has all the mixture, you go to Burma, Sri Lanka, China, Japan. They all kinds of, I was talking about awareness, that the practice of awareness. If you go to Tibetan monasteries, they draw sand powder mandala, for instance. They make very, very delicate, sand mandalas. You could maybe Google it if you want to know. It's quite an interesting process. And then we have rituals. We chant, we recite mantras. But then if you go to Japan, they practice meditation by making tea. And I'm serious. I have been to one of those tea ceremonies. And for us, coming from Tibet, and the Japanese are very, very proper. And I have sat through several of these tea ceremonies, and they're painful. You have to sit there like 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And tea, and you would think it's a tea ceremony, and you may think that the tea may be special. Nothing. Actually, to be honest, tea is sort of disgusting. After all of that, but then it's the process. It's got nothing to do with the tea itself. And then, for instance, in Zen tradition, we develop this awareness by making flower arrangement. Like how you make flowers. And there is like so many teachings on that. It's called Akibana. So sometimes this myriad variety of technique that is found in Buddhism can be quite, enriching. But other times, I think many students get so confused. As I said earlier, human beings like to have some sort of order that everybody must follow this, and this is the only way. But not only Buddhism, and this is something I would say very Indian mind. It's a very pluralist. Everything, like whatever is good today is also bad tomorrow. It's very stretchable here and there, and this could be very, very confusing for a lot of people. Now, I don't know whether I'm making any sense, because it's kind of difficult to just give you in short time the sort of picture of Buddhism. So if you have questions or discussions, I'm happy to answer. Yes, please. Did you have a question? Okay. And also, please, when we study Buddhism, we also study something called pramana, which is Buddhist logic, which involves an argument. And this is the tradition that Buddha himself said that no one must take his teachings at face value. You must analyze, you must criticize. So this is a very, very important gift from the Buddha. He told that you have to criticize him and his teachings. So the tradition of debate is a very, very strong. So I'm very happy to, if you have questions, debate.
Okay, I have a few questions.
Okay, please.
And if that is similar what you said, you're not mind, what do you consider to be, in the wider sense, even though you mentioned, or in general terms, to be Buddhist today? And I want just a small question. And would you say that Buddha was a Buddhist?
Oh, very important. Buddha was not a Buddhist, of course not. And something important I need to tell you. There's not a single prayer in Buddhism that we pray by saying, may all become Buddhist. Not a single prayer. Buddhists don't really... To become a Buddhist is not that important. Other people become Buddhist or not, but to be awakened. So we have a lot of prayers. May all be awakened. May all become Buddha. That we have, but not a single sentence we pray that may somebody become Buddhist.
Because I think you mentioned once that Buddha started become much later.
Yes, statue of the Buddha. Do we have one here? Yes, statue of the Buddha behind me. I think, I'm quite sure I'm right, became much later. And for good reason. First, there was no statues or anything like that. But after several hundred years later, of course, the way people relate to whatever they are emotionally attached always ends up changing, I don't know what is next. This coming month, actually, I'm going to Thailand at a conference, and it's a conference about Buddhism and artificial intelligence, which is a very interesting and actually many Buddhist scholars and leaders are very happy about it because anyway, the image of the Buddha or all the iconography came much later. I think the first ever Buddhist image is there's something called Wheel of Life. If any one of you have ever seen Wheel of Life, it's a round, and in the center is a three animal: pig, snake, and a bird, which represents ignorance, anger, and a desire. And then outer circle, there's a white, half is white and half is black, which represents what we call bad karma and good karma. And then comes the outer circle. There's a six different perception. Like hell, hell. I guess like any other religion, hell, heaven. Buddhists also have that, but it's a bit like this, huh? I'll tell you. The Buddhists believe in 6 realms. Hell is one, heaven is one, then there's asura, animal realm, ghost realm, so on and so forth. But if you ask especially a Mahayana Buddhism, they don't believe that it exists outside. It's your projection. So it's a bit like, let's say, after a really late night party, you get up in the morning, you are still in the bed and you are really groggy and you are really don't know where you are really, tired, you are not clear. They call it animal experience, animal projection. And then you take a shower, you blow your hair properly, put a lipstick or, shave your beard and put a moisturizer, aftershave, tie, suit, you feel you look good, you are pleased with yourself. That is what Buddhists would say heavenly projection. God, so you are proud. The God is associated with the pride in Buddhism. Okay, now you look good. But then you go to office and then there's this your colleague whom you are jealous with, and your boss is like giving you a hard time, whatever. Then there is a ghost realm, all the other realms. Just to give you an example. Okay, so there's that. And then outer circle is what we call 12 interdependent origination. Is kind of difficult to explain right now. And then the most outside is a big monster holding this circle. It's a very common iconography. It's a really nice actually. The monster is holding this circle. And this monster, if you ask what is that monster? Time. Time is a monster. Everything, whether you are heavenly, human, no matter what, you are a subject of time. And time is like a fang, like a monster. And time, as long as you are victim of time, it means you are a victim of uncertainty. You don't know what's next. You can not really predict. And that is a pain. So that is the first iconography. And then, am I talking too much on this? Okay. And then, during the Ashoka, King Ashoka, one of the most important Buddhist patrons, some of his structure, like architecture, he actually was responsible making lot of stupas, which represents Buddha's mind. Very interesting. During his time, he had 3 iconography, which is a seat with a tree behind, which represents Buddha's enlightenment. but there's no statue, there's no like human figure. Then there's a bed with two sal trees that represents Buddha's parinirvana, death. And then there's a tree with a deer and a will, which represents Buddha's teaching. That's it, actually. So, but by the time you reach to the Ashoka, that's like about 400 years later, already human beings are using this kind of symbolic stuff. Even when I was growing up, studying Buddhism, my teachers will discourage me making notes or looking at books. We are supposed to learn everything by heart. Okay, in one way it's good, but on the other, and this came from the Indian ancient tradition, the Upanishad. They really detest making notes, and you have to learn by heart. What's the point of writing it down? You have to write it down on your heart and the head and all that. But I think it backfired Indians a little bit, because down the line there's no record like the Egyptians and the Chinese. So then maybe extra zeros get added after 500 years, because there's mentions like, the Ashoka, the king, the great king, his palace was, inside his palace is like 500 miles. Wow, now that's like if he wants to have a tea, and imagine there was no like aeroplane those days. So if he wants to have a cup of tea or a hot water, it would take like months to travel 500 miles. Somebody need to gallop on the horse, isn't it? But these things happens. Okay, so down the line, and then slowly the image of the Buddha is Buddha. So of course we now have to use, and that's not rejected. It's not really like, I know like in certain religion like Islam, they consider idol worshipping is not good, but in Buddhism, as I said, idol came later. Idol was never encouraged, but later it was not discouraged, it's actually encouraged, because depending on what kind of people you are.
Because you mentioned about Buddhism like a science,
Right.
because I know some facts about India and what they're trying to achieve in the science. I'm really interested in how would you describe the relationship between science, talking to the scientists, and the Buddhism today, and 200 years ago, for example? Was closer? You are talking, or you are
Well,
talking
okay.
with them, or you are...
I forgot the word. I think there's a really anyway, I think we can find out later, but I'm quite sure. Science, the great thing about science is they say that it's based on ignorance. They never say that we are sure this is it. You understand? They're never sure. We are in the process of checking, finding. Now this is sort of the base of the science. Now with Buddhism, it's not like that. There's, the Buddhist view is already decided. All compounded things are impermanent, 1. All emotions are pain, 2, so on and so forth. Okay? So there's that. Science and Buddhism. Okay, when we have a lot of conversation with so-called scientists and physicists. One of the biggest fun sometimes it gets heated, is okay, one very simple example. the scientists will always want a proof, right? Empirical, you need a proof. Where is the proof? But for the Buddhist ear, the moment you ask for a proof, then you are talking about subjective. Because, okay, here is the proof. So I'm talking, I can't be saying, hey, this is the proof. This doesn't have a mind. I'm proving to you, this is the proof. So your mind is working. So the Buddhists will always think this proof is useless. It's never objective. There is always a subject involved. I think this is a big difference between science and Buddhism. But as I said, science never make, decision, and which is always something that we really respect. We like it very much. And I think, objective world, Buddhists just never differentiate between objective world and the subjective world. And then if you are talking about a philology, the words like mind, when scientists use the word mind and when the Buddhists use the word mind, it may be meaning two different things. So the scientists may be talking about brain. And again here, we don't know what is brain. So Buddhists may say, oh yes, brain is mind. Just as everything is mind, but mind is not brain. And things like that.
I will go on another side now. According to you, what did Buddhism gain from its expansion to the West? Because I think that Buddhism went to the West.
Yes.
And did the Buddhism get and what?
I think, as a Buddhist myself, of course, I would like to see Buddhism flourishing. And the West, I think the greatest thing, and I sometimes make a joke about this, it's really a joke. I always say that the biggest contribution from the West is this anarchy mind, this anarchical mind, and that is such a good thing for a Buddhist, because the analytical, not believing in face value, you really want to know what it is, search, debate. And if you do that, the Buddhists are quite happy, you understand? So, and I think the result is already there. I think among the intellectuals, I think, the Buddhism at times gets recognized as at least a subject of conversation during the dinner or during a coffee. And I think for a Buddhist, I think it's important because the way to guard Buddhism is through what we call hearing and contemplation. You need to hear and contemplate. And another thing is, and this is a little bit double-edged, it's almost like, for me, it's almost a joy to talk about Buddhism to you guys here, because you guys don't have this Asian cultural baggage. You understand? So I can really do whatever I like on this canvas, the blank canvas, and this is quite good. But of course, I also have to be aware that you have your own culture, you have your own language. So there I have to always, there I have to bring my awareness.
This will be my last. And I will really ask some help from the audience if they have some questions.
But these are very...
In the light note, even if the question looks very difficult, but I think in light note, just to finish. independence, freedom of speech, and very often you mention in the political correctness.
Yes.
Democracy. These are all synonyms for measuring and showing complete freedom.
Right.
I'm talking about the world here. Does such a thing even exist? Or are they just perfecting the development of such a vision?
Very important question. And yeah, as I said earlier, right at the beginning, the purpose of life. And I always quote this. This is one of the greatest commentator of Buddhism. His name is Shantadeva. Really, really important commentator. And he said, the Buddhists, those who consider themselves as a Buddhist, they should try to, train their mind and, really watch out with their negative emotions and ignorance. But they are allowed to have one ignorance. They should have one ignorance. They are allowed to have one ignorance. And what is that? Believing that there is an enlightenment. And why should you have that? Because you are suffering. So, purpose of life, democracy, individual rights. If you really want a Buddhist answer, the Buddhist would say it's all a myth. And it's also dependent arising. It's a subject of dependent arising. Because, for instance, you can see, okay, so, how should I put it? Like let's say America. I went to America in the 1980s. And in the 1980s, if you go to a bookshop, the 80% of the bookshop is filled by something to do with the low, how to deal with a low self-esteem. Everything about, confidence and how good you are and how we have to really think ourselves as great and, all the 7 steps of this, 12 steps of that. And 80s, 90s, and now we are in the, this. So now we have a lot of people who are basically, who grow up and they're like a perfect narcissist. Okay, so maybe in the 60s and 50s they've suffered with a low self-esteem. And now, different kinds of suffering. Now everybody thinks they're the best, they're the greatest. They're but it's not really true, because if you're the only one who thinks you're the greatest and the rest really agree with it, then of course it will be no problem. But the rest also thinks they're the greatest. So the world is too small for, people, young people, the modern people who keeps on thinking that they are the greatest. And also things like individual rights, individualism, how individual is so, that also gives birth to alienation. So everybody's cherishing individualism, okay, individualism, this, that. But then now the modern problem seems to be everybody is lonely, everybody is alienated. And why are you lonely? Because you have been working so hard to be individual. I have my own right. I need my own space. Okay, now you have it. But now you feel alienated, and you feel bored, and you feel lonely, but we have the answer on social media, but I don't know where this will take us. This will, I'm sure, take us. So, if you are asking me, as a Buddhist, these are all new toys. These are all new water gun. These are all new Barbie doll. Yes, they're very sophisticated and they're very convincing, but I don't know. So that's where the Buddhist wisdom of how to deal with the world of paradoxy, I think, is important.
There is a question? No. Yeah.
If you don't mind, it is from the book that I would just like to
Yes.
ask you just to elaborate a bit
Please.
more. It says, not for happiness.
Okay.
And it says, imagine a cave on a mountain, and inside the cave sits a yogi. Day after day, he practices relative bodhicitta while in villages surrounding his mountain, babies die of hunger at a horrific rate.
Right.
The babies obviously need immediate help, yet this yogi remains in his cave, thinking about how much he would love to bring all the babies, their mothers and fathers, and all sentient beings to enlightenment. However bizarre it may seem from a worldly point of view, this cave-dwelling yogi is far more worthy of homage than the international organization that ends up providing humanitarian. Would you mind just elaborating?
Yes, it's a very, at a glance it's very sensitive, isn't it? Yeah. Well, the book, Not for Happiness, I'm so surprised that you have even read those books. These are very technical, and Buddhists talk a lot about mind training. Mind training is a big thing. There's a lots and lots of mind training. For instance, I don't know whether you have ever heard of a word called vipassana, which is and then there's all this mindfulness stuff. And by the way, I should tell you, there's a mindfulness, there's a vipassana, but there's also something called mindfulness movement. They're a little bit different. I should tell you this. So, mind training, yes, there's a lot. And I think when you are talking about something called bodhicitta, we are talking about a very big time mind training. And in that context, the mind training through developing this really vast motivation is considered far more important than actions such as building hospitals. Because, especially for the beginners, because like building a hospital could be very limiting and could lead you to ego, could lead you to all kinds of traps. You understand, like, oh, I'm really good, like this. So for the beginners, the advice for the bodhicitta practitioners is to really train your mind to be totally, totally dedicated to the welfare of the other beings. If you have really achieved that, then you can build a hospital, a small one. The hospital gets collapsed due to, I don't know, political reasons, fire, earthquake, whatever. You will not give any qualms. You will build another one. You will, or, somebody praises you, somebody criticizes your hospital, whatever. Doesn't matter, because your motivation is deeply, deeply rooted to the dedication to the others. But if it is not deeply rooted, then it could bring you pain. Buddhism actually, you were talking earlier about science and Buddhism. I think on that context, Buddhism is, I think, actually it's more interesting when the Buddhist and the psychologist, when we discuss, it's quite interesting. The Buddhists, you see, this is how the Buddhists think. I don't know if there's any psychologist here. Let's say, I was talking about how wisdom is considered more important than morality and ethics. So let's say I'm treating this guy. Let's say I'm the psychologist, and I'm treating him. This is my patient. The Buddhist understanding is this. Okay, so here I am treating this man. Treat means I'm already assuming that he's not normal, isn't it? That's otherwise why would I treat him, right? So with the Buddhist awareness, I have to really be conscious that, okay, that's my projection. Remember the glass of water, I see it as a water, but the fish sees something different. Who knows, maybe he's the one who's actually normal and I'm not I'm the sick one. But anyway, I've got the degree as a psychologist, he doesn't. So, and he somehow came to me anyway. So, okay, well, my projection, he doesn't look normal, he doesn't behave normal. My projection. So that's already a wisdom. That's already good. That is already making me very humble and big. Now, if I don't have that, and if I'm stuck with my text, looking at him, he's not normal. He's not normal. He's not normal. The way he moves, the way he does this, not normal. Then I give him drugs. And then I have this goal. I want him to do certain things according to my way. And then poor man, he may even do it, and I'm not satisfied. And I keep on giving him drugs or a treatment, and I may ruin him. And this is why in the Buddhist principle, wisdom is so much more important than the means, the ethic, and morality.
Yeah, Rinpoche, I'm glad that you did not use this cards. It was very well behaved. Thank you very much for your
Oh, okay. I look at this.
One more question. Can you please just repeat this one word I missed it? Which is this one illusion that Buddhists are allowed to have?
Oh, wow, that's a big one. Huh? The illusion that there is an enlightenment. Of enlightenment. You know, the Buddhists always pray, may I get enlightenment like that. But actually, on the higher level, that's also an illusion.
Can you say something a little bit more about it?
Okay, yeah, because it's quite... So I'm using this example always, and I don't know, somehow I feel that this is the best example. Let's say you are dreaming, okay? Let's say you are dreaming and you are having a nightmare. Let's say you are in a small room and you have a nightmare of like crocodiles eating you, about to attack you. And you are like going crazy, you are panicked. And your friend is next door or maybe next to you. And he sees that you are having a nightmare, and then he shakes you, pokes you, pinch you, maybe cold water, bucket of cold water, you wake up. Okay? Now, the thing is, okay, so the nightmare is what we call samsara. The suffering, the pain, all of that. And cold water, and you wake up, no crocodile, yeah? That is awakened, enlightenment, nirvana. But the thing is, even before you dreamt, there was never a crocodile, right? And during your dream, there was no real crocodile, it was all dream. Yeah? So, if there is no crocodile, the bucket of cold water throwing on you have not chased away any crocodile. You got it? So that whole notion of enlightenment, freedom, is like this. It's just an illusion, but it's a necessary illusion. Why? Because you are already dreaming. If you are not dreaming, fine, no problem. Okay, one more.
I've heard that the Lotus Sutra is the important teaching of Buddha. Can you tell me what is the
Lotus Sutra is a very, very important sutra. In fact, nowadays there is even a school that only recites the title of the book, Lotus Sutra. I don't know whether, it has a background, but the Lotus Sutra, the reason why Lotus Sutra, the contents of the Lotus Sutra is so important is, remember I was telling you, you are perfect as you are. Remember I was telling you earlier? The only thing you need to remove is all the dirt. You need to remove. This is where Lotus Sutra, this information is found in the Lotus Sutra a lot. So many examples. Do you have lotus in
Like a flower.
lily? You have? Yeah, you have. And also the example is the lotus always grow in the muddy water. And and the Lotus Sutra said that, so if the water is very, very clean, no lotus, because you can't grow. So the Lotus Sutra really talks about, even though you have anger, greed, passion, aggression, jealousy, if you know how to handle it, those are like a muddy water. The lotus will grow. So instead of seeing them as a bad news or there's so much dirt, if you are someone who really is cultivating lotus, you'll be very happy. There's a lot of mud, lot of dirt. Lotus is going to be very healthy, you understand? So, yeah, the Lotus Sutra teaches a lot of that. It's a very, very important sutra. I can't, I think that's just the introduction. Yes, please.
I will ask on behalf of what's the Buddhist perception of unconsciousness?
Subconscious.
What is the Buddhist perception of unconsciousness?
Buddhist concept of subconsciousness. Yeah. Well, the word subconsciousness is maybe something that we need to discuss, subconsciousness, but I think the psychologist talks a lot, subconscious. Buddhists, what we talk about is undercurrent thought. We talk a lot about that, undercurrent thought. To explain this, we need to also explain a little bit about how the Buddhist concept called karma, the concept of karma, how it works. So it's a bit like this. For instance, okay, what's your name? I'm asking you. What's your name? Okay. Now, you don't have to remember this every single moment. You understand? You can forget about it. But the moment somebody mentions that, it's there already. You understand? You don't have to always remember this. I'm this. I'm this. I'm this. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, but I can't. You don't have to. This is strong imprint. For instance, okay, maybe not your name. You think you are a man?
I'm serious.
Exactly. Yeah, me too. I think I'm a man. But, for instance, although nowadays I get spaced out. The moment I see a man's gentleman sign, I think, this is my toilet. I never have to think, am I going here or am I going here? You understand? So subconsciously I decided I'm a man. And habitual patterns. Buddhists talk a lot about habitual patterns. And this is so important in Buddhism. Remember I was talking about awareness? How important it is to have awareness? Because if you don't have awareness, then you are ignorant. Now, why you become ignorant? Who is feeding the ignorance? Like a phone. If you have a phone, you need to charge battery. Who is charging this ignorance? This subconscious habitual pattern. And how? So now what the Buddhists do is economical embargo. You understand? So we need to starve the habitual pattern. And how do we do it? So many thousands of ways. Even sitting like this, 3 minutes a day. Even 3 minutes a day, doing nothing, just sitting. And actually there's a word, it's called shikantaza. In Japan they do this a lot. Your mind can think whatever you want. Your body just sit like this, 3 minutes. And during these 3 minutes, earthquake, falling water, friends knocking, water over boiling, I don't know, window, banging, no response, just sit. Even that, what it does is it creates economic embargo, cuts the ration to grow the habit. So if the habit is less, it doesn't charge the power of ignorance. And this is actually nothing religious again. For instance, but it's hard to, in one way it's hard to do. The reason is, we as a human being, we hate to become bored. Boring. But actually, boredom and wisdom is like a cousin. But we hate boredom and we love the wisdom even though we don't know what it is. But the boredom actually we do have. But the problem is, the moment we are bored, then we either, use this or read newspaper or, I don't know, watch television or call somebody or throw a party or we need to be engaged. But if you are brave enough to be bored for 3 minutes, and as you get bored, of course, you become lonely. And loneliness is another cousin, actually much closer than cousin, maybe brother of the wisdom, brother, sister. Loneliness. So you have to really love. You have to learn to love loneliness and the boredom. And then what happens? Situation will not overtake you. At the moment, all cause and conditions, situations always overtake you. So then you become the ruler of the situation. So that's the Buddhist idea.
Now, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much.